It's common now for athletes to announce their retirement from strongman once they've decided it's time to hang up the knee sleeves.
You'll never see me at World's Strongest Man again, I'm sorry. I have conquered my dream. That is all I wanted to do.
But what about the big names and rising stars that quietly stepped away? Hit the subscribe button and join us now as we look at 10 athletes who seem to just disappear. First up is South African strongman Johan Els. Johan's first big international competition was the 2016 World's Strongest Man, when he found himself in Group 5 along with the reigning champion at the time, Brian Shaw, and the rising star Matjaz Belsak. He wasn't able to make it out of the group stages, but he came third in the group and had a great first event, beating Brian on the loading race. That same year, he would go on to win Africa's Strongest Man for the first time, and he was invited back to the World's Strongest Man in 2017, but again didn't make it out of the group stages. In 2018, Johan returned to the Worlds and once again found himself in a group with Brian Shaw. Johan was sitting in third place after 5 events, and after winning a head-to-head battle with Adam Bishop on the stones, he qualified for his first World's Strongest Man final.
It's his first ever time, Aaron, into the final.
He got off to a shaky start in the final, placing 7th in the frame carry and zeroing the overhead press, but he finished strong and was the only man able to lift all 5 Atlas stones, ahead of the likes of Thor Bjornsson, Brian Shaw and Martins Lisses. He finished 6th overall, and being the first South African to make the World's Strongest Man final since Gerrit Badenhorst in the year 2000, he was really starting to put South Africa back on the map in the world of strongman. That year, he would also win Africa's Strongest Man for the second time, but this would turn out to be Johan's final performance in the sport. He was training hard for the 2019 Worlds, but as the competition rolled around, he was unable to get a visa and posted this emotional video.
I'm not going to World's Strongest Man, and quite devastating news. Been an emotional. Anyway.
2 months later, he posted a video announcing his retirement from the sport, and later that same year posted that he was completely drug-free and was now a soldier for Jesus. Verdict: left strongman to serve Jesus. Next up is Pavlo Nakonechnyy, also affectionately known as Wide Pavlo. Pavlo burst onto the international pro strongman scene in 2021 when he was invited to the Deadlift World Championships hosted at the Giants Live World Open. After coming joint second in the deadlift with a 1,000-pound pull, Pavlo went on to place 4th in the overall competition against some of the best athletes in the world. Unfortunately, Pavlo found himself in an altercation with another athlete after the show, and after rubbing the event organisers up the wrong way, he wasn't invited to another Giants Live until the following year. Pavlo returned to the World Open in 2022, this time much more humble and far more polished, and he took first place, beating the likes of Mitch Hooper and Alexei Novikov. This win qualified him for a spot at the 2023 World's Strongest Man, but he never made it to the competition thanks to a knee injury that had been bothering him throughout the first half of the year. In the summer of 2023, Pavlo was involved in a serious car accident which resulted in multiple surgeries and a lengthy rehab period. Soon after the accident, Pavlo deleted all of his posts on Instagram, leaving strength fans to wonder whether or not he was done with his lifting career for good. Pavlo instead started posting photos of him with his equally muscle-bound dog, but late in 2023 we started seeing glimpses of his training, which hopefully means the young Ukrainian will be returning to competition in the near future. Verdict: a long rehab after a car crash. Next up is Mike Burke, a hugely popular strongman from the USA who burst onto the scene when he placed 3rd at the 2011 Amateur Arnold's. Mike was already 37 when he was trying to break into the pro scene in 2011, but he progressed very quickly, winning the All-American Strongman Challenge that same year ahead of some established names in the sport. 2012 was a big year for Mike, as he competed in his first Arnold Strongman Classic, where he placed 5th. He podiumed at a Giants Live show in Melbourne, won America's Strongest Man, and received his first invitation to the World's Strongest Man. He didn't make it out of the group stages, but 2012 was really just the warm-up for 2013, as that year he would go on to win Giants Life Hungary and the Strongman Champions League North American Championships. He also very comfortably made it out of the group stages of the World's Strongest Man alongside Zydrunas Savickas and would go on to place 5th in the final. By 2014, Mike had really skyrocketed in popularity and went on to have another incredible year, this time making the podium at the Arnold Strongman Classic behind a peak Zydrunas and Brian Shaw. At the World's Strongest Man, Mike was top 2 in 5 of the heat events, and he had an incredible start to the 12-man final, but unfortunately dropping too many points on the squat lift ruined his chances of a podium finish, and he ended up taking 4th place. Mike's final performance in the sport was at the 2015 Ultimate Strongman World Team Championships, where he teamed up with Jerry Pritchett to represent Team Yankees. Fans were shocked to hear Mike's retirement announcement, and the online rumour mill was in full force, speculating, among other theories, whether Mike's departure from the sport was due to an apparent fallout with Brian Shaw.
I trained with Brian for a long time. Things went south between us, some things were said. Well, kind of ruined our relationship.
Mike never publicly addressed any of the rumours, but it seems his reasons for leaving was because at the time it was hard to make any good money from competing in the sport, and it was taking away from his business as a framing consultant. Mike seems to be living his best life post-Strongman, and him and his wife Marie recently bought a 20-acre horse ranch in their home state of Colorado. Verdict: left Strongman to grow his construction company. Next up is Kevin Nee, the youngest man ever to compete at the World's Strongest Man when he attended the 2005 competition just a few weeks after his 20th birthday. Kevin caught the strongman bug incredibly young, and in 2002 he was crowned America's strongest teen when he was 16 years old, beating out guys that were 3 years older and almost 100 pounds heavier than him. He grew enormously in popularity when in 2005 he featured in one of MTV's True Life episodes, which followed his journey from amateur to pro strongman. Kevin quickly became a regular on the pro strongman scene, and by 2007 he was on the podium of the big strongman competitions such as Mohegan Sun alongside the likes of Mariusz Pudzianowski. At 21 years old, just months after having bicep surgery, Kevin pulled a 410 kilo deadlift world record, and that same year he also made the World's Strongest Man final, where he placed 8th. Unfortunately, Kevin was plagued with injuries, suffering tendon tears on both biceps and detaching a pec in competition. In a 2020 Talking Strongman episode, Kevin admitted that being so young and having no savings or backup career, he relied on prize and sponsorship money, so rushed back to competition and never took the time to rehab his injuries properly. His last competition was the 2014 North America's Strongest Man, where after no prep, he surprised himself with a 4th place finish. But after tearing the long head of his biceps off in the gym shortly afterwards, he decided to throw in the towel. Verdict: left strongman due to repeat injuries. Next up is Romanian athlete Paul Pirjol. Just like Kevin Nee, Paul was incredibly young when he started competing in the pro scene. At just 19 years old, he briefly held the world record in the axle press at 195 kilos, and there was a lot of talk about Paul being a big future name of the sport. Paul competed at his first and ultimately only World's Strongest Man competition in 2011, but wasn't able to qualify out of the group stages. After that, he almost exclusively stuck to the Strongman Champions League scene, and his last known competition was the Odd Haugen Strongman Classic in 2015. Paul never announced his retirement from the sport, but quietly slimmed down and stopped competing. He now lives with his wife in the USA. Verdict: lifestyle change. While Andrus Murumets isn't one of the most well-known names in strongman, he had some great results during his time in the sport. Hailing from Estonia, Andrus' first international competition was in 2003, and his first big podium finish was at the 2005 IFSA European Championships, where he placed 3rd out of 17 of the best athletes in the world at the time. Andrus was signed as an IFSA athlete and would compete in the federation almost monthly, picking up 6 international wins and 24 international podiums along the way. In 2007, he competed in his first Arnold Strongman Classic, and he ended up in 3rd place, sharing the podium with 2 of the best athletes of the era, Zydrunas Savickas and Vasil Varastyuk. Andrus was best known for his incredible grip strength and held world records in the Rolling Thunder and the Arnold's Timber Carry. In 2009, he was still competing regularly, had started a family and opened a gym, and the busy lifestyle started to take its toll on his health. In 2010, he told Iron Mind magazine that he had been suffering with health issues, but it had ultimately been diagnosed as burnout, and he hoped to be back for the 2011 season. Andrus never did return to competition, with his last showing being the 2009 SCL Ukraine, where he placed 5th. He still works in the fitness industry and has since opened multiple sports clubs across Estonia. Verdict: burnout. Manfred Hoberl was one of the original big personalities in Strongman, delighting strength fans with his ridiculous big arms since 1990. But Manfred was a serious athlete and really began to rise up the rankings during the early 90s. In 1993, Manfred won his first big international competition, Europe's Strongest Man, ahead of 3 World's Strongest Man winners, Magnus Ver Magnusson, Jamie Reeves and Gary Taylor. Manfred then went on to win the 1993 and 94 World Muscle Power Classic and was one of the favourites to win the 1994 World's Strongest Man. In the 1994 competition, it was neck and neck between Manfred and Magnus, with Magnus ultimately taking the win. That same year, Manfred would go on to win the 1994 Strongest Man on Earth, but shortly afterwards he was involved in a near-fatal car crash. After many months of rehab, Manfred attempted a return to the sport, but suffered a bicep injury and decided to call it quits. Verdict: career-ending car crash. Ben Brunning was a Welsh athlete who first appeared at Britain's Strongest Man in 2018. He placed 10th out of 13 and again the following year had the exact same result, so there was very little expectations on him going into the 2019 Giants Live World Tour Finals. However, Ben had the performance of his life, placing 2nd overall behind Mateusz Kiliashkovsky and ahead of Alexei Novikov, Evan Singleton and both Stoltman brothers. This qualified him for the 2020 World's Strongest Man, and just 2 months after his incredible Giants Live performance, he competed in and placed 2nd at the official Strongman Games. Britain's Strongest Man 2020 took place in January, and this time people had quite high expectations of Ben, but unfortunately he was forced to withdraw after the first event with a back injury. The injury ended up being pretty severe, and Ben never did make it to the World's Strongest Man. He started training MMA in a bid to lose weight, and in early 2022 he won his first ever fight. Verdict: forced out by injury. Matjaz Belsak is another athlete who started very young, and he was competing at the highest level of the sport at 21 years old. He tied first place on points at his first Giants Live competition in 2014, ahead of Eddie Hall and Konstantin Janasha, which qualified him for his first World's Strongest Man the following year at 22 years old. Matjaz would go on to amass 10 international competition wins, with highlights being the 2017 Strongman Champions League World Finals and the 2017 Arnold's Europe. Being so young still, he was touted as the future of the sport, but the reality was that 60 international competitions over just a few years had taken its toll, and Matjaz started to suffer multiple injuries. Ultimately, he needed a full hip replacement, which put an end to his international strongman career. Verdict: injuries. And finally, we have Martin Wilder, who was dubbed the Deadlift Kid thanks to having a 400 kilo deadlift in his late teens. Like half the men on this list, Martin started Strongman young and was hitting international podiums such as the 2009 FIBO at 21 years old. Martin won the 2011 Giants Live Finland and 2014 Strongman Champions League Portugal competitions and was on 19 international podiums over the course of his career. Like Belsak, Martin competed regularly, but his strongman career lasted a very respectable 8 years, and he started to wind things down in 2017 when he started a family. Verdict: career ran its course.